The Story King. Welcome to the Story King, where legends come alive and destinies unfold. They called her mad for trusting beasts, until the Alpha King's wolves formed a wall around her. The first time Elara walked into the Thornwood Forest alone, the villagers gathered at the edge to watch her die. "Mad girl," they whispered, clutching their children close. "The wolves will tear her apart before sunset." But Elara didn't look back. She had nothing left to lose, not after they'd burned her grandmother's cottage, not after they'd called her a witch for the crime of healing wounded animals, not after the baker's son had died from a fever she couldn't cure and they'd blamed her anyway. The forest, they said, was cursed. The wolves that prowled its depths were monsters, led by something darker still, the Alpha King, a creature of nightmare and fang. She welcomed the darkness between the trees. What the villagers didn't know was that Elara had been hearing the wolves sing for months. In her dreams, she ran with them beneath a silver moon, her breath misting in the cold air, her heart pounding with a wild joy she'd never known in the village. The dreams felt more real than her waking life, and in them, a voice like thunder and silk whispered her name. "Come home." The forest swallowed her whole. Ancient pines rose like cathedral pillars, their branches weaving a canopy so dense that twilight reigned even at noon. Elara's boots crushed frost-brittle leaves, each step taking her deeper into legend. The air smelled of winter and wet earth and something else, something alive and watching. She felt the eyes on her after the first mile. Yellow eyes, gleaming from the shadows. A low growl rolled through the undergrowth like distant thunder. Elara's heart hammered against her ribs, but she didn't run. Running meant prey. Instead, she stopped walking, closed her eyes, and did what the dreams had taught her. She listened with more than her ears. The forest breathed around her, wind through branches, water trickling over stone, and beneath it all, the steady pulse of heartbeats. So many heartbeats. When she opened her eyes, they had emerged from the shadows. Wolves, dozens of them, forming a loose circle around her. They were massive, far larger than any wolf should be, with eyes that held too much intelligence. Their fur ranged from silver to charcoal to pure midnight black, and they watched her with an intensity that should have been terrifying. But Elara felt no fear, only recognition. "Hello," she whispered. The largest wolf, a silver-coated giant with scars crossing his muzzle, took a step forward. Then another. He was close enough now that she could see the individual hairs of his coat, smell the wild scent of him. Slowly, giving her every chance to flee, he lowered his massive head. Elara reached out and placed her hand between his ears. The wolf's eyes closed. A sound rumbled from his chest, not a growl, but something closer to a purr. Around the circle, the other wolves sat, their postures relaxing. One by one, they approached, pressing their heads against her hands, her legs, as if greeting someone long lost. "They were right," a voice said from the darkness, and Elara's breath caught. "You are mad." The wolves parted like a curtain, and he stepped through. The Alpha King was a man, but only in the way that a hurricane is merely wind. Tall and broad-shouldered, he moved with a predator's fluid grace, every step deliberate and controlled. His hair was black as a raven's wing, falling to his shoulders in wild waves. But it was his eyes that held her, the same molten gold as his wolves, ancient and fathomless and fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. He wore the forest like a crown, leather and fur, tribal markings inked across his bare arms, a presence that commanded the very air to stillness. "No sane woman," he continued, voice low and rough, "walks into my forest alone." He tilted his head, studying her. "Unless she's running from something worse than death." "I'm not running," Elara said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "I'm coming home." Something flickered in those golden eyes, surprise, perhaps, or recognition. He moved closer, and she noticed the scars on his chest, the way the wolves tracked his every movement with devotion bordering on worship. When he stopped just a breath away, she could feel the heat radiating from his skin. "Do you know what I am?" he asked softly. "Yes." She met his gaze without flinching. You're the reason I've been dreaming of running on 4 legs. The reason I hear howling in my heartbeat. The reason I've never belonged among humans. She paused. You're why I'm here. For a long moment, the Alpha King stared at her, and Elara wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. Then, slowly, he raised one hand and cupped her face with surprising gentleness, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. They sent you away, he said, and it wasn't a question. His jaw tightened. Your own people cast you out. They were never my people. No, his voice dropped to a growl that vibrated through her bones. They weren't. That night, he led her deeper into the forest, to a place the villagers had forgotten existed. A stronghold built into the heart of an ancient oak grove, where dozens of wolves lounged around fires tended by men and women who shifted between human and beast with the ease of breathing. They called themselves the Moonfang Pack, and they welcomed her with knowing smiles, as if they'd been expecting her. The Alpha King, his pack called him Soren, gave her his own cabin, a space carved into living wood with windows that overlooked a starlit clearing. He didn't touch her again that night, but she felt his presence like a physical thing, protective and warm. Over the following weeks, Elara learned the truth. The curse on the forest was a blessing. The Moonfang were shifters, guardian wolves who'd protected the land for centuries. And she carried their blood. Her grandmother had been one of them, had fled the pack to live among humans, and Elara had inherited the gift even if it had never fully awakened. Until now, Soren taught her to shift, his patience infinite, his touch careful. The first time she took wolf form, he ran beside her through moonlit woods, their hulls twining together in a song of pure freedom. And when she stumbled, exhausted, he carried her back in his arms, whispering praise against her hair. You're magnificent, he murmured, and the reverence in his voice made her heart stutter. But peace never lasted. The villagers came 3 weeks after Elara vanished into the Thornwood. They came with torches and iron weapons, with hate in their hearts and fear driving them forward. They came to burn out the monsters, once and for all. Elara was gathering herbs when she heard the warning howls. She shifted and ran, her wolf form still clumsy but faster than any human could move. She arrived at the grove to find Soren standing at the front of his pack, facing down 50 armed men. Give us the witch, the village elder demanded, his voice shaking. Give us the girl, and we'll leave you in peace. Soren's laugh was a dark, dangerous sound. You want her, then come and take her. The wolves bristled, ready to tear the intruders apart. But Elara pushed through the pack, shifting back to human form as she stepped beside Soren. His head whipped toward her, eyes flashing with alarm. Elara, get back. No. She placed a hand on his arm, feeling the tension coiled in his muscles. No more blood. She faced the villagers, these people who'd shunned her, hurt her, driven her away. I'm not your witch, she said clearly. I'm not your monster. I'm Moonfang, and this is my pack, my family. If you want to kill me, you'll have to go through them. The elder raised his torch. So be it. What happened next would become legend. As the villagers charged forward, Soren's wolves didn't attack. Instead, they moved with perfect synchronization, forming a living wall around Elara, dozens of massive wolves standing shoulder to shoulder, creating an impenetrable barrier. Soren stood at the center, directly in front of her, his body a shield, his snarl a promise of violence if they dared continue. But it was what Elara did that stopped the charge. She raised her hands, and the forest itself responded. Vines erupted from the ground, forming a second wall. Trees groaned and shifted, their roots rising like serpents. The wind howled with voices that weren't quite human, and the temperature plummeted until frost crept across the village's weapons. I am Thornwood's daughter, Elara said, her voice carrying the weight of ancient power. And you are not welcome here. The villagers fled. They ran screaming back to their safe little houses, and they never returned to the forest again. In time, they would tell stories of the mad witch who commanded wolves, who became the Alpha King's queen. They wouldn't be entirely wrong. As the last echo of footsteps faded, Soren turned to face her. His wolves dispersed, returning to the grove, giving them space. He searched her face, gold eyes blazing with something fierce and tender. "You could have let us fight," he said hoarsely. "Could have let me tear them apart for what they did to you." "I know." Elara touched his face, feeling the tension drain from him at her touch. "But I didn't need revenge. I needed them to see that I'd found something they could never give me." She smiled. "I found my place. I found my pack. I found me." The word was barely a whisper, vulnerable in a way she'd never heard from him. "You," she confirmed. Soren pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers, his breath mingling with hers in the cold air. "They called you mad for trusting beasts," he murmured. "But you were the sanest person in that village. You knew where you belonged." "With you," Elara said. "I belong with you." When he kissed her, it felt like coming home and setting out on an adventure all at once. Around them, the pack howled their approval, their song echoing through the Thornwood like a blessing. Elara had been cast out, called mad, and hunted. But in losing everything, she'd found her truth. Sometimes the monsters of legend were just misunderstood protectors. Sometimes the mad ones were the only ones brave enough to see clearly. And sometimes, the beasts loved you better than any human ever could. Under the watchful eyes of the Moonfang, with the Alpha King's arms around her and the forest singing its approval, Elara finally understood what she'd always been searching for. Not safety, not acceptance from those who would never understand, but freedom, pack, love. She was home at last. Thank you for journeying with the Story King. Subscribe for more tales where magic is real and love conquers all.